to shape policies and initiatives that will make a tangible difference in the lives of millions. Let us pool our collective wisdom, engage in open and constructive dialogue, and strive for an innovative solution that transcends borders and boundaries. I have no doubt that our discussion will be thought-provoking, insightful, and fruitful. Together, we can lay the foundation for a safer, more resilient world, leaving a lasting legacy for generations to come. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to each and every one of you. May our time together be filled with collaboration, inspiration, and a shared commitment to building a future that is resilient in the face of adversity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the warm and inspiring welcome address. Your words truly set the tone for the constructive dialogues to follow. Let's move on to our next segment. I now have the honor of requesting the chair to welcome our distinguished chief guests and dignitaries on the dais with a bouquet of flowers. Dr. P.K. Mishra ji. शेरपा श्री अमिताभ कांत जी, to Miss Mami Mizutoi, thank you, sir, ma'am. We are grateful for your presence and commitment to the cause of disaster risk reduction. Moving forward, I would like to draw your attention to the representatives from Troika nations, Indonesia and Brazil. Their valuable remarks and insights are crucial to our shared goals. May I now request representative from Indonesia, Dr. Raditya Jati ji, to share their remarks.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Indonesian government, it is my honor and privilege to address the esteemed gathering of the G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group. As we gather here today, we recognize the critical importance of disaster risk reduction in our collective pursuit of a safer and more resilient world. Indonesia is no stranger to the devastating impacts of disaster. Our nation, located in the Pacific Ring of Fire and prone to various climate-related hazards, has faced numerous challenges in managing and mitigating the risks associated with such events. Therefore, we attach great significance to international collaboration and knowledge sharing on disaster risk reduction. Allow me to remind the forum about some of the main messages of the Bali Agenda for Resilience as the outcome document of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction (GPDRR) in 2022. It is recognized that investing in resilience is not only a moral imperative but also a smart economic decision. It also emphasizes the importance of integrating disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation into development planning and decision-making process at all levels. By incorporating resilience measures into development projects, countries can reduce the impact of disaster on lives, infrastructure, and economics, thus enabling sustainable development. Ultimately, the Bali Agenda for Resilience sends a clear message that building resilience is shared responsibility. It calls for inclusive and participatory approach that prioritizes the needs and perspective of vulnerable groups, including women, children, persons with disability, and marginalized communities. That is why the President of Indonesia introduced sustainable resilience in his remarks during the opening of the global platform of GPDRR in Bali. Allow me to also point out the midterm review of the Sendai Framework Disaster Risk Reduction acknowledges that framework has faced challenges in staying on the tracks towards its goal. In the context, the G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group holds tremendous potential in helping to steer the SFDRR back on track. The recent opportunity seized by the Government of India to host the G20 DRR Working Group is both timely and highly beneficial, particularly for countries that face knowledge-sharing, collaborative efforts to address disaster risk effectively. By leveraging the collective expertise and resources of G20 member countries, the G20 DRR Working Group can contribute significantly to enhancing global disaster resilience. The values embedded within the communique and the G20 DRR Working Group deliberation will have far-reaching impact on G20 countries, particularly in areas such as governance, development, investment, and economic growth. We express our deepest gratitude to all member countries for their commitment to the G20 DRR Working Group. It is our joint effort that we can address the challenge posed by a disaster effectively. We commend the group's dedication to promoting and implementing strategies that enhance resilience, build capacity, and reduce vulnerability in our respective nation, ensuring that this working group is indeed used and useful. In this regard, Indonesia reaffirms its commitment to engage actively in the discussion surrounding the draft communique and roadmap. We believe that these documents will serve as crucial tools in guiding our collective effort toward achieving disaster risk reduction goals. They will enable us to identify best practices, share experience, and foster partnership to better prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. Moreover, it is imperative that the outcome document of our deliberation be adequately reflected in the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, which will shape the policy agenda for the G20 summit. The inclusion of disaster risk reduction as priority in this declaration will signify our unwavering commitment to the safety and well-being of our population as well as to preserve our environment. As we move forward, it is crucial to recognize the interconnected nature of disaster risk reduction with the other global challenges such as climate change, sustainable development, and poverty eradication. Our effort in disaster risk reduction should be aligned with the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Paris Agreement, and the Sustainable Development Goals. In conclusion, let us seize this opportunity to reinforce our commitment to disaster risk reduction and the well-being of our communities. Together, we can forge a path toward a sustainable, resilient future. The Indonesian government stands ready to actively engage in the discussion, share our experience, and collaborate with all member countries to create tangible and effective outcome. Let us work hard, hand in hand, to ensure that the communique, roadmap, and the New Delhi declarations collectively reflect our determination to safeguard our society from devastating impact of disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your valuable remarks. We may now look forward from the representative of Brazil, Dr. Volney Barrios G. Sir, please.
Bom dia a todos os representantes do Grupo G20. Bom dia ao ilustre presidente, o Dr. Missa. Nome Missitori, em nome dos quais eu cumprimento todos os componentes da mesa e os demais delegados do G20. O Brasil reconhece a importância do G20 como um fórum de diálogo e ação, onde as principais economias do mundo se reúnem para enfrentar questões globais de grande relevância. Diante de inúmeros desafios, desde a recuperação econômica pós-pandemia até as mudanças climáticas, a desigualdade e a estabilidade geopolítica, entendemos que a busca para a redução de risco de desastre exige uma abordagem conjunta, tanto em nível local como em nível global. É uma honra para nós estarmos aqui hoje para discutir os assuntos relacionados à redução de risco de desastres, especialmente no momento em que o Brasil está prestes a assumir a condição desses diálogos no âmbito do G20. De antemão, não poderíamos deixar de parabenizar a presidência pro tempore indiana pelo trabalho realizado na promoção dessa agenda, entendendo que a visão da Índia forneceu uma direção importante para o grupo de trabalho. Consideramos as 5 prioridades elencadas pela Índia como da mais alta relevância. As iniciativas para alcançar a cobertura global de sistemas de alerta precoce, os investimentos em infraestrutura resiliente a desastre e ao clima, a busca por alternativas para financiamento de estrutura para redução de risco de desastres, a evolução dos sistemas de resposta e reabilitação de desastres nacional e global, e ainda a maior aplicação de abordagens baseadas em ecossistemas para redução de risco de desastres. São iniciativas que estão alinhadas ao Marco de Sendai e que podem contribuir para o alcance das metas recentemente discutidas na reunião de revisão de meio período ocorrida em Nova York em maio de 2023. Nesse sentido, reforçamos o compromisso em avançar na agenda proposta. No momento em que o Brasil está prestes a assumir a condição desse grupo de trabalho no âmbito do G20, gostaríamos de afirmar que nossa presidência pro tempore será pautada pelos princípios da inclusão, sustentabilidade e resiliência, buscando construir um futuro mais justo e próspero para todos. Entendemos que tanto as estratégias voltadas para a prevenção quanto para a resiliência podem ser mais bem exploradas, avançando resultados mais efetivos se houver políticas adequadas e efetivas de inclusão social. Importa destacar que em muitos países em desenvolvimento, como o Brasil, os baixos índices de inclusão social contribuem para o aumento do risco de desastre de forma tão significativa quanto as demais mudanças climáticas. Entendemos que esta realidade tem submetido relevantes parcelas de suas populações a ocupar e conviver precariamente em áreas de risco, aumentando a vulnerabilidade frente a eventos adversos e, consequentemente, potencializando os efeitos dos desastres. Desta forma, acreditamos firmemente que a inclusão social, com foco na redução da pobreza e acesso à habitação em área segura, é uma importante ferramenta estratégicas e políticas nacionais para a redução do risco de desastres e suas consequências. Estamos cientes dos desafios que nos aguardam, mas também enxergamos grandes oportunidades de construir um mundo mais justo, sustentável e próspero. Contamos com a colaboração, o apoio e a participação ativa de todos os membros do G20 para alcançarmos resultados significativos. O Brasil está pronto para desempenhar um papel ativo nessa cooperação global. Junto, podemos construir um futuro mais resiliente e seguro para nossas populações. Devemos compartilhar lições aprendidas, trocar tecnologias e promover iniciativas conjuntas para melhorar a prevenção, a resposta e a recuperação de desastres. Por fim, destaco que o compromisso do governo brasileiro com a redução do risco de desastres está alinhado com o Marco de Sendai, com a Agenda 2030 para Desenvolvimento Sustentável e com os acordos da Convenção das Nações Unidas sobre Mudanças Climáticas. E transmito aqui o entusiasmo brasileiro na condução desse grupo de trabalho para a redução do risco de desastres no próximo ano. Obrigado.
Thank you, sir, for adding your unique perspective to our discussion. Before we hear from our esteemed dignitaries and chief guests, I will request the chair to address the August gathering.
Thank you very much. A very good morning. Principal Secretary to our Prime Minister, Dr. Mishra, G20 Sherpa, Mr. Amitabh Kant, SRSG, Madam Mami Mizutori, dear colleagues from G20 countries, invited countries and international organizations, and knowledge partners. This meeting is being referred to as third and final meeting. It's indeed third meeting, but certainly not the final meeting of the working group. It's the final meeting during our presidency, but as you heard from our colleagues in Brazil, There is commitment in this group to take this work forward. It requires sustained effort, and I'm really delighted that we are getting the traction from everyone. I would like to thank all of you for working with a lot of goodwill, enthusiasm, and positivity to bring this agenda up to here. We have a lot of momentum. There are many deliverables. So even beyond this meeting, in the remaining months of our presidency, you will see a lot of work in concluding some of these deliverables and taking this work forwards. I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to working with you over the next 3 days and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your address. As we continue our journey through this meeting, we now arrive at a significant part of our agenda. We have the pleasure of hearing from some of the most esteemed voices in disaster risk reduction. May I now invite Ms. Mami Mizutori-san, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, to share her address with us. Ma'am, you have been with us through all the working group meetings on disaster risk reduction, and we laud your consistent support.
Dr. P.K. Mishra, Principal Secretary to the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Amitabh Kant, Sherpa of the Indian Government to G20, dear Chair of the Working Group, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is my great pleasure to join you for this third and final G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group meeting under India's presidency. I would like to extend my deep appreciation to the Government of India for hosting and organizing 3 excellent meetings. You have been an outstanding host, a tremendous advocate and leader of the disaster risk reduction agenda, and it has been a privilege for the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction to accompany you through this journey. The establishment of this working group is a true testament to the commitment of all G20 countries to finally make the change from reacting to disasters after they wreck us to proactively addressing the disaster risk causes. I say finally because the call to make this change is not a new one at all. For too long, disaster risk reduction has been seen as an additional expense for development programs and infrastructure projects. But we know that this is not true nor correct. Investment in resilience generate dividends in avoided disasters, and this is why we must all enhance resources and capacities for prevention and risk reduction with great urgency. At the midpoint of the Sendai framework, progress has certainly been made, but we are not where we need to be. I am confident that this working group can be the catalyst for the change we need by bringing disaster risk reduction to the G20 agenda. You have firmly placed it as an issue of economic and social concern, and as an issue that demands attention from the whole of your government, including your national financial authorities and your economic planning authorities. You have sent a clear message that disaster risk reduction cannot be forgotten if we really want to achieve development and our climate goals. Listening to your deliberations in Mumbai and Gandhinagar, I have heard 4 keywords emerge: integration, mainstreaming, collaboration, and partnership. First, as the climate crisis intensifies, you have acknowledged the importance of integrating disaster risk reduction into all aspects of national financial planning and spending and across the global financial system. Second, you have recognized the need to mainstream disaster risk reduction into policy and investment decisions, as well as into standards, regulations, and legislative frameworks in all sectors, particularly infrastructure. national disaster management agencies have been loyal custodians of the agenda for many decades. But now is the time that this responsibility is shared across all ministries. Third, you have made a commitment to strengthen collaboration with the private sector, capital market actors, technology providers, and civil society organizations, and to better leverage their expertise. We commend this all-of-society approach because we cannot implement the Sendai framework without these partners. Fourth, you have been steadfast in your resolve to enhance partnership with developing countries to build their resilience, including through sharing your good practices. As developing countries are the ones most impacted by disasters, your support will go a long way to reducing global losses. Looking ahead, I believe that the true value of this working group lies in its potential to integrate disaster risk reduction across the whole of the G20 work. And as a first step, may I encourage you all to engage with your respective Sherpa offices as well as your ministries of finance to ensure that disaster risk reduction is reflected in their high-level outcomes this year. In concluding, I'd like to thank the government of Indonesia for hosting the global platform where the Bali Agenda for Resilience was born, and I'm delighted that the government of Brazil will carry the DRR baton forward as you take on the presidency of the G20 in December. And I would like to reaffirm UNDRR's unwavering support to this working group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your inspiring words. Sir, this is a significant event, and having the respected G20 Sherpa here with us strengthens our commitment to disaster risk reduction. Sir, can we have your address?
Mr. P.K. Mishra, Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, Ms. Mami Mizutori, Mr. Kamal Kishore, members of NDMA, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. India is hosting the G20 presidency during very challenging times. The world is confronted in the post-COVID era with a vast segment of population going below poverty line. We're facing the crisis of slowdown of growth across the world. 1/3 of the world is facing inflation. We're seeing global debt vulnerabilities. We're facing the challenge of climate action and climate finance. And we are also seeing a protracted geopolitical crisis over the last 1.5 years. India views many of these challenges as opportunities. Our Prime Minister, who's the leader of G20, has said that India's presidency will be inclusive, it'll be decisive, it'll be ambitious, and it'll be action-oriented. The constitution of the DRR group is our commitment to demonstrate that we are being action-oriented. Ladies and gentlemen, after 2 successful meetings of the Disaster Risk Reduction Working Groups, we are all very delighted to welcome you to Chennai at the final gathering of this working group under India's presidency. We are all heartened to see this as yet another show of collective spirit of unity and collaboration. The G20s have come together to institutionalize this new work stream in the Sherpa track under our presidency. Our commitment is demonstrated by the presence of our Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. The earthquakes in Turkey earlier this year and the lives lost due to it have served as a stark reminder of the urgent need to prioritize disaster risk reduction in our policy discourse. Heat waves have claimed thousands of lives in Europe, and droughts have left millions of people in Africa grappling with the scarcity of water and resources. Disaster risk reduction is not merely about preparedness and swift emergency response. DRR encompasses a swift emergency response. It is a comprehensive approach that aims to identify and address the underlying drivers of risk: climate change, urban development policies, governance, architectures, and financing frameworks. Needless to say, all the countries represented in this hall believe that disaster risk reduction is not just a policy issue, but a moral imperative. Growth and progress and disaster risk reduction are two sides of the same coin. I'm filled with hope for a more disaster resilient future, not merely because of the establishment of this working group, but also because of the profound enthusiasm that each one of you has brought to the table over the course of the last 8 months. Your spirited participation and engagement in co-creating the agenda of this working group embodies G20's shared resolve to effect positive changes. The midterm review of Sendai framework in May this year has reminded us that we need to accelerate the implementation of disaster risk reduction policies, programs, and investment at all levels of government, private sector, and society. It is our belief and hope that the deliberations that have taken place in this working group will firstly transform early warning into early action, because it is only timely and decisive action that can mitigate the devastating impact of disasters in our communities. Secondly, that we'll integrate disaster risk assessments into infrastructure project appraisals so that our infrastructure can withstand the forces of nature. And thirdly, help us align our efforts towards comprehensive national financing strategies, engage with the private sector, and promote innovative instruments so that we can overcome the financial barriers that stand between us and a more disaster resilient world. It has been India's earnest attempt, as our Prime Minister has said, to make our presidency very, very inclusive, decisive, ambitious, and action-oriented. And we are delighted to see that Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group has done just that. I hope that you will negotiate the final outcome documents and give us a very progressive and a futuristic outcome document that will find its place into the leaders' declaration. Ladies and gentlemen, it brings us great joy to learn that the government of Brazil will be carrying forward the DRR agenda as they assume the esteemed presidency of the G20 in December. We wish their DRR group all the very best. Ladies and gentlemen, as G20, we have a responsibility to drive a strong, sustainable, inclusive, and resilient growth. And the discussions here today hold the power to transform challenges into opportunities, adversity into resilience, and uncertainty into hope. We wish everyone the best. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring words. Lastly, I am honored to invite Dr. P.K. Mishra ji, Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, to share his vision with us. Sir, you have been the pillar of disaster risk reduction efforts in India, and the very inception of this working group is owing to those efforts. Sir.
Miss Mame Mijutori, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General, Sri Amitabh Kant, India's G20 Sherpa, colleagues from G20 members, as well as guest countries, officials from the international organizations, Sri Kamal Kishore, Chair of the Working Group, colleagues from India's National Disaster Management Authority, National Disaster Management Institute, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of Tamil Nadu, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here with you at the third meeting of the Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group. We met for the first time in Gandhinagar in March this year. Since then, the world has seen some of the unprecedented disasters. Cities in almost the entire northern hemisphere have been in the grip of massive heat waves. The forest fires in Canada and the haze that followed affected cities in many parts of North America. Here in India, we have seen major cyclonic activity on our east and west coast. Delhi experienced its worst flood in 45 years, and we are not even halfway through the monsoon season. Friends, the impact of climate change related disasters are no longer into the distant future. They are already here, they are enormous, they are interconnected, and they affect everyone across the planet. The challenges that the world faces today underlines the importance of this working group. In a short span of 4 months, the working group has made a lot of progress and generated good momentum. However, we need to do more. The ambition of this working group must match the scale of the problem we face. The time for incremental change has passed. We need transformation of local, national, and global systems for preventing the creation of a new disaster risk, preventing the creation of new disaster risk and effectively managing existing disaster risk. It is a fact that disparate national and global efforts actively seek convergence so as to maximize their collective impact. We cannot afford fragmented efforts that are driven by narrow institutional perspective. We must be driven by a problem-solving approach. The UN Secretary General's Early Warning for All initiative is an example of this approach. It is good to note that G20 has identified early warning and early action as one of the 5 priorities and putting its full weight behind it. In an area of financing disaster risk reduction, it is important that we pursue structured mechanisms at all levels of financing all aspects of disaster risk reduction. Over the last few years, in India, we have completely transformed the way disaster risk reduction is financed. We now have a predictable mechanism for financing not just disaster response, but also disaster mitigation, preparedness, and recovery. Can we have analogous arrangements at the global level as well? We need to pursue greater convergence between various streams of financing available for disaster risk reduction. Climate finance has to be an integral part of financing of disaster risk reduction. Mobilizing private finance for disaster risk reduction has been a challenge, but without it, we will not be able to go very far in addressing all the disaster risk reduction needs. What kind of enabling environment should the government create to attract private finance into disaster risk reduction? How can G20 generate momentum around this area and ensure that private investment in disaster risk reduction is not only an expression of corporate social responsibility, but part of the core business of firms? In the area of disaster resilient infrastructure, we are already seeing the benefit of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure we established in partnership with a number of G20 nations, the UN and others a few years ago. The coalition's work is informing how countries, including small island developing countries, can use better risk assessments and metrics to upgrade their standards and make more risk-informed investments in infrastructure development. It is important that we work towards taking these ideas to scale. We have to think beyond pilots and design our initiatives for scale. On building back better after disasters, there has been much practical experience over the last few years. But we have to find ways to institutionalize some of the good practices. Like preparedness for response, we need to have emphasis on preparedness for recovery, underpinned by financial arrangements, institutional mechanism, and capacities. Friends, I am happy to note that in all the 5 priority areas pursued by the working group, there has been significant progress and on all the deliverables. I have seen the zero draft of the communique that you are going to discuss over the next few days. It puts forward a very clear and strategic agenda on disaster risk reduction for the G20 nations. I hope that the spirit of convergence, consensus, and co-creation that has permeated the deliberations of the working group over the last 4 months will prevail over the next 3 days and beyond. We are grateful for the sustained support we have received from our knowledge partners in this endeavor. I am particularly appreciative of the personal engagement of the Special Representative of UN Secretary General, Ms. Mami Mijutori, in supporting the work of this group. We are also very pleased with the engagement of the Troika in shaping the agenda of this working group. We have built on the foundations laid by earlier presidencies, including Indonesia, Japan, and Mexico, and we are delighted that Brazil will take this forward. We are particularly delighted to welcome Secretary Olney from Brazil to this meeting. We want to assure Secretary Olney and his team that you will have our support and engagement as we move forward. During the last 8 months of India's G20 presidency, the whole nation has participated very enthusiastically. So far, 177 meetings have been held in 56 locations in the country. Delegates from various countries have actively participated in the deliberations. They also have a glimpse of India's social, cultural, and natural variety and diversity. Much progress has been made in the substantive aspects of the G20 agenda. I am sure the summit meeting, which will be held in 1.5 months' time, will be a landmark event. The contribution of all of you to this outcome will be significant. I wish you all the very best for your deliberations over the coming days to ensure that the G20 delivers a meaningful outcome on disaster risk reduction for the world to make it much safer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your vision with us and the appreciation. This is valuable to us. To conclude the inaugural session, may I now request Thiru S.K. Prabhakarji, Additional Chief Secretary, Commissioner of Revenue Administration and State Relief Commissioner, Government of Tamil Nadu, to deliver the vote of thanks. But before that, sir, may I request you to kindly felicitate our esteemed dignitaries with a souvenir from the state of Tamil Nadu?
Good morning to all of you. Honorable speakers, distinguished guests, and dear colleagues. As we conclude the inaugural session, on behalf of the Indian Presidency and the chair of the DRR Working Group and Government of Tamil Nadu, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the dignitaries who are present here today, particularly the delegates from G20 countries, including Troika, invited countries, and international organizations. Your presence here today signifies the importance of our collective endeavor. As we gather here to convene the final meeting of the DRR Working Group under the Indian Presidency, I am both overwhelmed and proud of what we have accomplished thus far. Together, we have the power to shape a better world for future generations, and the establishment of the DRR Working Group is a significant step in that direction. Great dignitaries have participated and they have spoken before me in this meeting today. I would like to extend my personal thanks to Dr. P.K. Mishra ji, who has come over here and who inspired us yesterday through an informal chat, as well as for the enlightening lecture he has given today. I also would like to extend my sincere thanks to Honorable Amitabh Kant, Sherpa G20 Indian Presidency, for gracing us with his presence, whose support and encouragement has been the driving force behind the creation of DRR Working Group and the progress we have made thus far. We owe to you, sir. Thank you very much. A special mention goes to Madam Mami Misutori, Special Representative to the Secretary General of the United Nations Office for DRR, for her unwavering support throughout this journey. I would like to also express my gratitude to officials from the Ministry of External Affairs and the senior officers from the NDMA authority, particularly Shri Kamal Kishore, Member Secretary, and other honorable members from NDMA, and Additional Secretary Hitesh Makwana from MHA for their valuable presence and guidance all through this event. They have contributed immensely to the success of this meeting. Last but not the least, I would like to express my deepest appreciation to our esteemed colleagues gathered here for their active engagement and immense support and participation, which has made this meeting truly memorable. Thank you all for your valuable contributions in the past as well as in the next 3 days. Together, we have taken a significant step towards building a safer and more resilient world. I look forward to the very fruitful discussions in the next 3 days. I also wish you all a very pleasant and comfortable stay in Chennai and Tamil Nadu. Let us continue our journey with passion and determination. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Your words resonate with our collective gratitude. Once again, thank you all for being here today and for your active participation and dedication to a cause that binds us all. As we move forward in this event, let's continue our collective efforts towards a disaster risk resilient future. This concludes this session, inaugural session. So we can break for tea and meet after 10 minutes.
Tamil Nadu is breathtaking, enchanting, divine, come. Revel in the spirit of Tamil Nadu. The Thalaiva of States welcomes delegates to an experience larger than life.